Hello everyone, I'm Nika from TAFU, a teen nature conservation organisation promoting personal responsibility towards nature and wildlife. Thank you all for joining us again for a special interview with Marc and christinesonvilla, professional and award-winning photographers, videographers and conservationists. Marc and Christine have dedicated their careers to promoting environmental consciousness through their work, which combines photography, film and multimedia. With their master's degrees in conservation biology and wildlife ecology, they have traveled the world to bring attention to the diverse ecosystems and their inhabitants. We are here this evening to hear their journey, the challenges in nature and wildlife conservation, and the impact that one photographer can have. Don't miss this opportunity to hear from two of the loud voices in conservation photography. Hello, Christine and Marc. Would you mind introducing yourselves to our audience?
Sure. Hi, we're happy for having, or thanks a lot for having us. Well, let's just briefly introduce ourselves. Marc and myself, we've been doing conservation photography and filmmaking basically for more than 12 years now, and have started largely in our own environment, basically here in our neighborhoods, and then ventured out into all sorts of countries, basically from ranging from the Everglades ecosystem in Florida to the deserts in Arabia and to Scandinavian countries, always on the search for interesting stories regarding wildlife. And yeah, basically we've come up with all sorts of trying to spread our messages to all sorts of print media and doing then films in TV or for TV stations. And yeah, basically that's what we're doing. Is there anything you would want to add to this?
Quite satisfied. I think there are so many stories need to be told that we don't get bored. So we're always searching and finding new stories and new topics.
Yeah. Is the picture behind you part of one story that you had?
Well, it's part of I would say more of vacation story. So it's not, it doesn't have a big impact on conservation. It was just one of the most impressive tiger sightings that we've had back in 2013. I think it was in India, and so it's more a memory of one of our journeys through Southeast Asia. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing anyhow. So can you tell us about your background and how you got into wildlife photography?
Well, our background is one that is university-based, more or less. Actually, myself, I initially wanted to venture into science and wanted to become a marine biologist. And the both of us, we met towards the end of our biology studies and soon figured that we had the same visions and ideas and wanted to document wildlife and nature conservation stories across the planet, more or less. And we figured we can't do this with, taking on proper jobs, kind of 9-to-5 jobs from Monday to Friday. And so we just launched into this adventure and tried to start up as freelancers. And so that's how we continuously came up with different stories and actually ventured into long-term storytelling, you could say. So the projects we focused on are usually those that last for many years or that evolve over the years, and we figured that they gain in depth and in interest for ourselves and therefore also for those who consume these projects or who get insights into projects.
Yeah, and what's the longest project?
Sorry, I didn't.
How long was your longest project approximately?
We're still in the process of gaining more and more material on a project about the coexistence of humans and big predators here in Central Europe. And we started this topic back in 2015 with a bear focus, and now lynxes came up and wolves, and more and more interactions or fields of interesting coexistence pop up and emerge. So we're still in the process of working on that. So it's now in the 7th year.
Yeah.
Wow.
But this consists of several, let's call it short-term projects or aspects, milestones. So we had magazine articles that just took one or 2 years in the process of making. Now we are in the third, I think it's the third TV production that we either produce or contributed to. So that's, like Christine said, it's milestones, but they are all focused on that topic of big predators in Central Europe.
That's pretty amazing. So when you see these predators, like, are they? I'm assuming they're really like far away from you. Is that right?
No, just go ahead.
No, just it's your turn. You wanted to say first. Yeah.
No, so you meant that they're far away from us, or the
Yeah, like when you're taking pictures of them, like how do you find them and how far
how
away?
we find them. Well, that's usually manifold approaches. So we get in touch with scientists, with rangers, with nature conservation professionals in the field, and try to basically create close-knit bonds so that we can work on a topic with a broad range of contributors, which also in the field of when talking about big predators, reaches out to hunters, to livestock farmers, so all sorts of people that have an interest in these topics or are stakeholders of these topics. And we do a lot of research ourselves as well, so basically figuring out where and when and how we should best go into the field, but it's always in close interaction with all the practitioners in the field who have, well, most of the knowledge and who help us to access all those places that are most suitable to achieve the photographs that we're aiming at.
Yeah, but after doing the first round of research, we've gained quite some experience in finding wildlife for ourselves. So we somehow know where to look for.
It must be quite tiring, but also amazing. Well, what would you consider to be like your biggest achievement in your career as wildlife photographers?
Well, that's hard to evaluate, but we've just returned from a public presentation tour in Switzerland, which was not the biggest milestone in our career, but it was quite rewarding because we got the chance to talk to many people. You know, we got some feedback. If you're producing or filming for TV or producing a TV documentary, you don't get feedback. You just have like the editors at the TV station, and they give you some feedback. So I think that at least for me now this year, or the beginning of 2023, was quite rewarding because we got to know and got in touch with so many people that somehow responded to our work. So it was not, for me right now, not the big publications like in famous magazines or the big TV productions, but more the direct feedback of people that I really consider something big for me. Yeah.
Absolutely. If I may add to this, it's really the chances of interacting with the people, of getting to know what they think about the topic, of seeing that it matters to somebody. And I believe that really is, well, the best feedback that you can get, that you see that the work that you're doing matters to somebody.
Yeah, amazing. And yeah. So can you like discuss like what would you say is the biggest challenge you face and you have faced as conservationists and photographers?
Well, I think to me, the biggest challenges are usually prejudices by people towards specific wildlife and animals. When we're talking about big predators in Central Europe, of course, it's brown bears, especially wolves, and to a lesser amount lynxes, that are viewed by many people as like big beasts that need to be controlled. And we just have this scenario currently in Austria where wolves are on the rise, and every sighting of a wolf is documented in media. So if there's a wolf that's been seen in the proximity of a settlement or a neighborhood, then this already causes huge media alerts all over the place. People are getting afraid whether they should leave their kids outside and so on. So there's a lot of prejudices on the one side and a lot of misinformation, or even a lack of information or a lack of proper information. So very often it is that people have preconceived ideas and they're being transferred from one stakeholder group to the next without actually questioning these. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is to overcome when doing the work that we are doing. So we usually see also the photography or filmmaking that we're doing as a means of communicating what we're doing. So it's just a beautiful type of way to visualize what's happening out there and to accompany the personal experiences that we have and all the knowledge that we've gathered from our own experiences and from interactions with scientists to a larger audience. And the tricky part is simply to find that audience that is not yet interested in nature itself.
Yeah,
so
that's the biggest challenge,
Perfect,
to target the new audience.
Yeah.
Maybe to add to your last question, we've already published in National Geographic. We have produced for TV with a big audience. We have public presentations with quite some people in the audience, which is nice, but it's always the audience that's already, drawn to the topic. No matter what we are talking about, it's nature-based topics and nature-based audience. And the biggest task is to find new audiences, I'd say. To reach out to those people who are not sensitive towards the topic of wildlife conservation.
And how do you go about trying to find those new people?
And using all sources of communication and all platforms that are out there. So no matter if it's public presentations that are not really linked to wildlife conservation platforms, that would be, in my opinion, one of the most crucial audiences, almost those outreaches that seem to target new audiences most.
Yeah. Also interacting with stakeholder groups that have very fierce opinions at certain times, which is also hunters and livestock farmers, and trying to find an objective way and a less emotional way of interacting with each other. So ourselves, we're trying to reach out to all groups and not kind of trade one group for the other, because we do understand, I think that's crucial also for all conservationists and photographers in conservation. You do need to understand the other's needs and the other's problems and challenges. And once you can refer to these, then you sort of have a different foundation from which you can work and communicate with these people. And I think that's the only way that real communication or a beginning of communication can actually take place. And well, it's a step-by-step procedure. I guess there's no real recipe, but simply, well, being persistent and keeping doing what you believe in and trying to reach out to all sorts of people and slowly but steadily growing the community.
It's not just communication, it's some sort of mediation.
Yeah.
It's part of meditation.
That would sometimes help as well.
Yeah, it sounds amazing and challenging, but also very rewarding. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you believe like the challenges in nature and wildlife conservation have evolved over the years, and what do you see as the biggest challenge faced by conservationists?
It's a tough question because the biggest challenge is, I think, pretty close to the answer that we just gave to the last question. So
yes.
Getting those people involved that are not yet involved. So that's the biggest challenge in my opinion.
But also, well, I had a thread of thought that I just lost at this very moment. Well, let me think about reaching out to those people, but also, I'm back on track. And in Europe, there's still, with many conservation organizations, with many NGOs, the idea that we can do it ourselves. So
You mean the communication?
Yeah, the communication. Yeah. The outreach from these NGOs is not as pronounced, literally not close as pronounced as, for example, in the United States or in Northern America, where nature conservation and photography and filmmaking in conservation is a huge topic, and NGOs themselves, by themselves, reach out to the photographers and filmmakers in the field to have them document their projects and their works. And this is still something that is, well, it has been improving over the last years, but it's still something that is not as big as in the United States, or the feeling or the understanding of NGOs that this is a crucial bit of work that needs extra attention, and it's not something that you can just do next to your kind of everyday work. So that's something that we should work on. But I guess the good thing is that the more conservation-oriented photographers and filmmakers come up and approach those NGOs, I guess the more they will realize that this really is a huge benefit to them if they have experts that come from an external
we believe that it takes or needs two parties that need to be professional. So the conservationists or the biologists and scientists, they need to be pros in their field, and we are the communicators, and we believe that wildlife conservation by the means of photography and film needs to be executed professionally as well, to be on the process.
Yeah, definitely. Something I've noticed in Europe in particular is that people don't think that there's much wildlife around us. Like, for example, like you just said, there's bears, there's lynxes, there's all sorts, but no one really notices it. So I think your project currently really does help people notice the wildlife that is around us.
I'd say so too.
That's true.
But it seems to be a universal kind of theme that many people always search for the big wildlife, especially when you're located in Europe, somewhere else, everywhere else, but Europe. And for some reason, there is a reason behind it, of course, because we're in the temperate area of the world, and of course there's, let's say, with comparison to the tropics, to tropical rainforest, a limited amount of species, or the range of species is lowered. But still, if you look more closely, there's so much to unravel and to discover. And we figured that it is also very rewarding for oneself to look around at your doorstep, more or less, to look what is there and to help bring this nature back, because there really is a big movement across Europe, even with a nature rewilding organization that we are associated with it as well, which is Rewilding Europe, where there's so much potential to bring back wilder nature to Europe. And of course, alongside those wilder natures, more of the wildlife species. And so I think that we are actually living at a time which is quite exciting for Europe, and we could all help shape the future of the European landscape. Absolutely, yeah. So maybe that helps and inspires people to look around a little bit. And once you start looking around, you soon discover and unravel that there's so much to explore. And it's not just like the literally big five that you can kind of count on one hand, but there's much more.
Yeah, it's like you get used to looking at them next, they end up appearing everywhere. It's like that everywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so can you discuss some of the creative techniques you use in photography to convey the importance of conservation and the challenges faced by wildlife and their habitats?
Yeah, we believe that storytelling through images is also a matter of focal length. So we use, or we over the last years, we sort of specialized in wildlife photo trapping, because we believe that capturing your subject and at the same time, have in the background everything that you need that makes the story whole or completes the story is a matter of focal length. And so we believe that for wildlife photography, wide angle photo trapping can be a very strong mean of telling the story. Yeah.
Or in general, simply wide angle photography for animals or wildlife, because there's certain wildlife that you can approach, of course, without using a photo trap. But especially when talking about elusive and very shy and also predator species, then using a photo trap approach is safer for both sides, more or less. But when talking about, I don't know, amphibians, for example, using a wide angle lens can contribute so much more to a photograph, the whole environment, so that you can really put the animal into the landscape and also play around with background and foreground and include little bits and pieces of information that contribute to your photograph. We usually highlight or point out to photographers that it's at least as important to focus on the background and foreground as on the very subject that you're photographing, because the little details in the photos that matter a lot. And so with wide angle, that's particularly important because you've got so much information in the photograph. And of course, it's when we are doing our project, one aspect of the photography, because we're always thinking in portfolios. So we're thinking about what can be, e.g., the 6 to 10 photographs that tell the story, and that can be as diverse as possible. So for this, of course, it's really good to include all sorts of focal lengths and to play around and have different messages with the photographs. But we considered for ourselves and our way of working and approaching these projects, photo trapping and wide angle photo trapping a really crucial component, basically a key component to communicate.
Yeah, but on the other hand, we use all means of photography. We use drones and long telephoto lenses, and we sometimes hide out somewhere in the bushes for days, or just stalking or meeting up with people. So photography or photography and filmmaking is the mean, or is the way of communicating, and so we use everything that's out there to tell the story.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So could you maybe share some of the successful conservation campaigns or initiatives that you have been part of, and how photography played an important role in it?
Well, we've had some, of course, apart from our big predator focus here in Central Europe, also a part or in other parts of the world, such as in the Florida Everglades, as I mentioned in the beginning. We still have close cooperations with several state parks and nature parks in Florida there, where we also did not just but photo trapping projects and accompanying scientists on location with their, especially with regard to orchid restoration work that was the Fakaji Preserve State Park, for example, in Florida. And what really inspires us always is that the photographs that we do, that these organizations can really make use of them, and that we manage to contribute with the photographs to enhancing the awareness of the people in the local area for the necessity to protect these areas. So that was definitely one issue with certain parts of the Florida Everglades.
But also with Austrian national parks, with the Austrian National Park Service, which is how to explain. So it's not just the specific national parks, but
it's kind of the top organization that is kind of a steering component for all the national parks in our country. So
then we've collaborated with projects funded by the European Union, conducted in Slovenia, in northern Croatia, and in Austria and Italy for bear conservation, for lynx conservation, and
so especially with lynxes, for example, we've highlighted one particular population in the alpine part of Austria, in one alpine part that is still very slim, consisting of just very few individuals, and where poaching is a large topic and has always been kept in silence, and nobody wanted to talk about it. And even for a while, or for the past decades, you could say, even nature communication and nature organizations or NGOs were under the impression, or had as a kind of a guideline to not talk about big predators such as lynxes. So keep quiet, so that nobody knows they're around or where they're around. And we realized that it didn't really work, because poaching took place nevertheless and still takes place. And so we started large media campaigns basically in collaboration with the NGOs in Austria, with the national parks, and managed to contribute to one case of poaching that was basically sentenced in Austria, or that was revealed in Austria around a few years ago. And we managed to, together with the photographs that we did and with all the communication work with the collaborating NGOs and so on, to really shed light onto these species. And so it's always hard to say how much it contributed to somebody being sensed or not. And we do believe that this not really, that's not particularly the power of a photograph, that somebody, a jury member can say, okay, we'll sentence this or that person for poaching. But it helps to bring attention to this very topic to the public, and that definitely took place. And so these are individual cases where we realize that talking about it, shedding light onto specific topics that people would rather not talk about, really helps make a difference. And especially when it comes to controversial topics with large predators and all those stories. But even what we figured is also quite interesting is when you present a topic as a foreigner of a particular place that you are not, where you're not from, or where you're not home based, such as was the case with, we did a lot of work on brown bears in Slovenia, and we eventually did a whole TV production on Slovenian wildlife and highlighted how people in Slovenia get on with nature a lot more easier and a lot more relaxed, with more acceptance than in other places, such as in Austria, in our home country, or in Germany and Switzerland. And what we realized was that people were totally surprised, the Slovenian people, that somebody from abroad, such as we as Austrians, look at their country in a way that is very positive, that is very supportive, and that helped them to see their own country and to see the successes of their own country in a new perspective. And so there's all sorts of approaches how you can, or how we believe you can make at least a contribution, if not necessarily change the whole story. But I think it's these bits and pieces and working persistently on specific topics that can help to shape people's perspectives.
Yeah, definitely. Would you say that there's any times that it's essentially important not to tell everyone where you found a specific species because it might put the species in danger?
Sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's definitely the case that that you need to be careful with the information you're handing out, and especially when it comes down to lynxes, for example, and the lynx poaching cases that we had in Austria, we never revealed exactly where these places would be. So some photographs would even be unrecognizable to the extent that they were taken at night, so nobody could really understand where exactly they've been. Of course, for some locals, if they were taken during daylight, there could be like mountain landscapes that you could recognize, and you could pinpoint that these animals may be in this area. But the thing is, with these animals, they could never be kind of pinpoint to a particular area, simply because that photo is taken on a given day, and these animals are, well, basically using huge ranges where they're kind of passing through every 2 or 3
Yeah,
weeks.
but to be honest, we hardly ever tell the exact position or location where we've.
No.
Yeah.
But you always got to be clear that certain bits of information in your photograph can reveal, of course, to specific well, insiders where a certain photo was taken. But well, we never use any explicit we never provide any explicit information where it has been taken, because that is not really an extra important information, and it does not add up, or it does not help the animal itself. But
yeah, but we've learned from the last years with the growing interest in wildlife photography, not just by professionals, but also hobby-wise, that it's not smart to tell everybody everything. So we are.
Or you need to talk about things But of course, you need to be aware that there are also a lot of people out there who are not necessarily focused on nature conservation, but more on photographing a specific animal, and they will go any length more or less to make this happen and not really worry too much about the wildlife or animals. So this is something you got to distinguish and differentiate, and that's important.
We believe taking an image of a protected or endangered species is not conservation photography,
Yeah.
you know, at the core of the meaning of conservation photography. So you need to be very, very cautious what you let the public know where certain topics can be found.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just in case. So yes. How do you collaborate with other conservationists, biologists, and scientists to ensure that your work accurately reflects the challenges faced by wildlife and their habitats?
Well, we're in close exchange all the time. So whenever we, for example, we publish a book or we do a talk or we work on a new film, then we're trying to make sure that the information we provide is accurate and is alongside with what the conservationists would want to communicate. So we're always trying to make sure, on the one hand side, that we're producing content and information that is attractive and entertaining and interesting, because this all is crucial aspect for the public, for those who read an article, view the pictures, and so on. But we also want to make sure that it is aligned with what the conservationists are which is most dear to them and most important to them, which is also what is important for us.
Yeah, definitely. Is there a specific way you can balance the two? Because it sounds quite difficult.
Yeah, at times it is, because what we've learned with scientists usually is, and I know this by myself because I've been very much focused on science and actually wanted to become a scientist myself, is that scientists are very accurate. And of course, they are very careful with giving definite answers. So most answers will continue or will contain maybe, potentially, possibly, probably, most probably, and including too many of these words is kind of not so super attractive for an audience. So you're trying to be more precise in the answers you're giving. And so this is kind of navigating between these poles and between the scientists and the public. But usually, so far, we've always found kind of a middle way that appealed to everybody involved.
Yeah, I suppose that's where photography comes in as well. It shows the definite thing that did happen, which is a lot nicer than words sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah.
In your opinion, what would you say individuals and communities can do to support conservation efforts and to help protect our natural heritage?
Oh, they can do the most, to be honest. You know, they are the base of everything. So if you have an NGO or someone who's in charge of something, then that's just one part of conservation or of the outreach of conservation. So we highly encourage the people to become part of everything, of the story and the conservation, how to say,
the ambitions.
Yeah, not just the ambitions,
projects.
but yeah, to just participate and become part of it. So that's the most important part, in my opinion. Yeah, to encourage people to become a part of something.
Yeah, and basically nowadays it's so super easy, because even if you're not a professional in the field, working professionally with photography, filmmaking, everybody has a mobile phone and is able to take pictures and films, which has become sort of second nature to all of us. And so you can also, besides uploading like funny videos and all of that stuff, you can also document the nature aspects of what is surrounding you, what is at our doorstep. For example, a good example would be the so-called barrier tracking app not sure if you or your community have heard of it, for example. There's like a huge movement in Europe, more or less around for a few years or even a decade already, that is focused on freeing our rivers again to let fish migrate more freely again, which is called dam removal. They've got a big website, and they have an app that's called the Barrier Tracker app. We can send you the link if you want to. And that's quite interesting because everybody can simply monitor in his or her neighborhood if there is any barrier blocking a river, and you can put this into this app and you can contribute on a, well, as more or less as a citizen science to broadening the knowledge of where we have barriers and where these could be removed, more or less, which is something that's happening at a rapid pace through Europe, and which is a huge potential for our rivers that are basically in an ecologically disaster state, but but there is hope on the horizon, you could say.
Yeah, there always is, really. There's almost never a time when there is no hope.
Absolutely. So that there's always little things that you can do. And I guess that's important for all of us to know, that we don't necessarily need to start a huge project for many years, but we can do the little bits and pieces, and they can be enormously rewarding because we understand ourselves as part of a community, as part of a growing community of people who matter or who care about nature and who make nature matter again. And I guess that's really important. And this can be ever so rewarding, so that we do the little things, and these little things, they add up and become big things.
Yeah, definitely. Personal responsibility for every little thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you discuss any exciting new technologies like the photography you said, or innovations that you believe will help and have a positive impact on nature and wildlife conservation in the future?
Can you think of any?
Yeah, I think the low light ability of cameras, or using high ISO and getting some decent quality out of it, is something that I really appreciate. It has improved over the last years, and that gives you some new or it opens up new fields of photography, in my opinion, because you can work on the low light conditions. You can work longer in the evening or early in the morning, and that's quite crucial for wildlife topics. So that's something that I really appreciate in new techniques. But also drone photography, not so much with wildlife, but with landscapes, and giving an impression of the proximity of nature and urban areas, or just providing a completely new perspective, which opens up minds. If you show something really new, that's something that's really crucial for me, and has improved over the last years, the quality of drone photography and filmmaking. Yeah,
And
I'm
also
not the biggest fan. Sorry?
I was gonna say the accessibility to it has also increased, because some lower quality ones have gone to lower prices that more people can access and then see for themselves.
I just wanted to say that I'm not the biggest fan of 8K, 12K, or even 4K cameras, because it's a huge amount of data that you need to handle and store twice and 3 times and so on again. So but new cameras are really have really improved and are an amazing tool when it comes to
That's right.
finding new ways of communicating.
But also for us, we've realized it does not always take the newest equipment. So we usually wait and try to use the equipment that we have to its abilities, or to the full abilities. And then when we realize, okay, now we've reached sort of a border again, then we continue and move on to upgrade the equipment. But we've realized also that even some older cameras, that you can still use them for particular jobs, which are maybe not high speed associated, because when you look at how quick cameras are to capture wildlife that is in action, that is of course a huge advancement with the newest cameras that are out in the field. but even older equipment can be definitely used for good purposes. So it's always a trade-off that you don't immediately need to exchange the old stuff for the newest stuff. So it can be a progression.
Yeah, I remember once in some David Attenborough documentary, they mentioned that it was actually they used a phone camera rather than something else because it was extremely detailed. I don't know how, did you hear something like that? And have you ever done it?
We haven't actually.
We haven't, but
No.
we've heard of it. But also, if you consider GoPro cameras or something that's not really, they are not expensive anymore, but the quality is outstanding.
Huge, yeah.
Yeah, so and it's so easy to set up. You know, a small camera positioning somewhere, I don't know, close to a den of a fox or underwater, close up to fishes or so. So that's really neat. So that's something where the technique has improved, yeah, outstandingly.
Yeah. Could you maybe walk us through like your typical day out in the field, from the preparation to even to post shooting?
Well, usually the preparation starts the day before,
yeah. The evening.
in the evening, because a typical day would be getting up long before daylight sets in, before sunrise. And that's usually not the time of the day when we're most active. So everything needs to be prepared, and you just need to kind of put on your clothes, grab your backpack, and then off you go, more or less. So there's not much talking at this time of the day. And usually then we just head out, and we have already in mind and have a plan where we're going. So it's not that we're setting out and looking for the place where we'll be shooting or we'll be working. So we discovered or scouted the place the day before or even before that. And then, well, we're simply on location and hoping for the best to happen. And usually our work day would end, well, 2 hours after sunrise, more or less. Then we grab some breakfast when other people go and get started with work, which is one of my favorite parts. And then we, if possible, it depends on the work routine on that day. If possible, we take a break then because we started early. And then if we're in working routine,
yeah, usually we also do the double saving parts.
Yeah.
You know, after breakfast, we get all footage or all images saved and
Exactly.
secured, and then we take a break. And in the afternoon, we have the second session. And post-production, we usually do, if we're working on a film project, we do all the post-production after a session, which can be as long as, I don't know, 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks even. And then after returning back home, we start with the post-processing. With photography, I think we also don't do any editing in the field.
Not much,
not
just
major editing, just some sorting and getting an overview of what we've produced in the last days over the course of a week. But usually we do all the preparations, like Christine mentioned, all research and all preparation of the equipment before we are heading out early in the morning the day before. And then we have 2 sessions throughout the day with a break over midday. And after a few days, we have the bigger senses of what we've produced over the period, over the course of,
It's not necessarily the case that we always come back with photographs.
Yeah.
I guess the worst we had was 2 weeks of I guess one scene of 20 seconds or so.
Yeah.
We both were in different
you're
places.
thinking of the Chekhov.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a bit horrible because you're always kind of in huge anticipation. The first few days you're like super alert all the time, and then after a while frustration starts.
Yeah, but the post-production was easy on that session, you know, with just one side, 2 weeks, 2 people, so seconds of footage was an easy task.
Yeah, that can happen too.
Oh dear. Why, what's the main reason that you get up so early to do it? Is it because you're mainly invisible, or is it because animals are more active?
Usually wildlife is more active early in the mornings and late afternoons. But of course, there's not the necessity of getting up early. So if you work on a topic where, I don't know, underwater stuff, usually we're going out around midday because the light's the strongest and the best for underwater photography. So it's always depending on the topic, but usually we're getting up early, looking for some wildlife or finding the best light for landscape photography. And then we have the midday break and then the second session in the afternoon.
Yeah. And of course, it depends on the daily rhythms of the wildlife that we'd
Sure.
like to photograph or film, since there are some individuals that like to get up late. So there's no point in
Getting up
us
early.
getting up too early. And so you better make sure that there's a rhythm that corresponds.
Yeah. What message would you give to aspiring photographers and conservationists who are passionate about making a positive impact on the environment?
Let's go for it. We need more and more people working on that
Yeah.
field. So that's really our opinion. So,
Absolutely, yeah. And never take a no for a no, I would say, because I don't know how many times we were told this is not impossible, this is not possible, you can't do this, and this hasn't been done before, and no way. And if you listen to this, well, it's good sometimes to listen to advice, but don't take it too close in a way, and always listen to your heart and to your own inner calling. And if you are assured that you want to go that way, and if you have a vision and an idea, then this is going to come true in some way or the other, and it's going to come true in a way that nobody else has ever experienced. And that's why other people say it's not possible, because they haven't experienced it. So just keep going, follow your dreams, and be realistic in a way too. Like when we set and tried for jackals, for example, for 2 weeks in one spot and realized that's not going to work out too good, then you got to rearrange in a way, and you have to readjust and figure out how, if another spot would be better, or if another project even would be better. But the general idea, I think you shouldn't let yourself down by other people, and just because they think it's not possible.
Yeah.
sometimes you get the impression that economy or politics seem to be more important than nature, wildlife, and conservation. And we believe that that's not true, and it's important to highlight that our environment is important to everything and everybody on this planet, and so it needs people to shout out the message.
Yeah, the more the better. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And everything's impossible until it's done.
That's right.
A bit more of a technical question. How would you approach capturing like a perfect shot in terms of like composition and lighting while still making it interesting?
Well, there's many approaches, I would say, but as I mentioned once before, or let's put it that way, I think it's a combination of several aspects. It's knowing your camera as good as you can. It's like knowing your mobile phone. Maybe nowadays everybody knows or could type a text message or anything more or less blindfolded. But the same should be true for your camera, that you can just simply deal with it in any situation, and you don't necessarily need to think about how do I expose this and what do I do in this situation, because especially with wildlife being in activity, things go really quickly, and so you need to be aware of changing lighting situations, such as exposure that varies completely if you're looking into the sun or if you're looking the other direction, and also differs whether the object or the subject you're shooting is closer to the camera or farther away, for example. So it makes a difference if there's a little dark spot, or if the dark spot, if we're talking about a brown bear, becomes really huge and kind of fills up your whole picture all of a sudden because it's moving all the time, and that needs you to adjust exposure, and at the same time always have in mind how you creatively want to make the picture. So how do you position the animal? How do you include other aspects? I usually will highlight to people that it's important to always look at the edges of the photograph as well, because I mean, of course you can crop and so on, and the newest cameras, they have, well, they allow you a lot to crop, for example, but our approach is always to will make the pictures as good as possible in the field so that it takes less amount of time at the computer, simply because we don't like computer work so much. I mean, you still spend a lot of time in front of the computer, but if we can reduce the amount, then that's good. And so that's why we would highlight it's really important to make sure that you've got in the picture what you want to have in the picture and exclude already in the field, if possible, what can be excluded. So continuously looking at the technical aspects that should be kind of second nature to you, and then the creative aspect. And this comes basically with practice. The more you practice, the more it comes at ease or with ease.
But I think you always have to keep in mind that it's really important to have a vision, you know, to have an idea or a clue. So it's really important to know the technical side or aspect of your image, but also know your subject pretty well, know your topic pretty well. And you, in my opinion, or at least with our images that have been the most successful in terms of competitions or outreach, is you really have to have an idea what to tell, what should be the core message, and then you can start and work on it. So that's also something really important, at least to us, to have the vision of your image, that it's already, you know, somehow we always feel that the key images of our work are already done and finished in our heads quite some time before it really gets captured in the field. So
yeah, it's good to have a plan and to have an idea of what pictures you'd like to capture up front before you go into the field. Of course, things will vary then as well, but the better the idea of what you want to capture, the better the result can actually be.
And to give you an example with our bear projects, after we have figured or found out that brown bears get really close to humans and even sometimes venture in their gardens, after finding this pretty interesting aspect of a bear's life, it took 1.5 years until finally the image was captured by one of our cameras, so that the trail cameras or the camera traps. But it took quite a while to find the right spot, to find the right angle, the composition, to figure out the light and the amount of artificial light if working on a nocturnal species. And so there was a long list of sort of preparations after eventually really take the image.
That's also the rewarding part. If you invest a lot of effort and there's a lot of trial and error involved, of course, a lot of setbacks, but if it finally works out, that is really the thing that keeps you going further, because you see, okay, it works, it works out and you managed it. And then you can go out and use this image to communicate it to a wider public. And this is also something I guess we'd like to stress as well, that those pictures, they shouldn't kind of be kept in the archive only and simply be maybe shared via internet, but it's really crucial to find partners so that the messages can be communicated to a larger public, whether it's magazines, it's photo exhibitions, talks in schools. We did a lot of stuff in schools as well, or in other venues and locations. So finding means of communicating that only brings more value to the image if it really is seen and if the message behind it is seen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I suppose you sort of already said this in some ways, but how would you go about finding like the best location to get a picture? Like you said, you talked to scientists, but you also said that the trial and error with your, I forgot the species, but the 2 weeks one, that was really important as well.
Yeah. How do we go about it?
I would say going out in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We check out the locations ourselves, and because it's also important or to know whether this can yield a good photograph or not. And the scientists cannot certainly, unless they are photographers themselves, predict if this is going to be a good photo location.
So that's why we are depending on input from scientists to I don't know, to get everything started, but then we are out in the field ourselves, and yeah.
And when you got the first time to see the area, do you have to be like quite cautious where you're going to like just make sure you don't disturb the wildlife, obviously in primary sense, but to make sure that they do come there later on, or does it not really matter that much?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Always depending on the species and the behavior of the species. We
Thinking about wolves maybe in Germany.
That's true. Yeah.
That was quite an undertaking, really. We had support there from hunters and forestry people in the area. That was the border area of Germany and Poland, where there is a good established population of wolves. And they are so tricky to approach. I mean, we tried everything. We came up with our camouflage tents. We camouflaged ourselves. We looked for the wind and all of that stuff. And the first 2 weeks was a bit jackal inspired. First 2 weeks was nothing. And not even tracks or so. So it was really hard, even though the area was considered to be ideal for wolves. And so it took us several approaches and several attempts until finally we managed to get images. And we figured, even when we first saw one wolf and figured now we are in the right spot, that actually it depends a lot on the acceptance of, or that's what we figured for ourselves, on the acceptance of that wildlife species, whether or not they tolerate us in their environment. So you can do a lot with being in the right wind conditions and camouflaging yourself so that all your silhouette is kind of dissolved and so on. But still, especially with wildlife species that have so acute senses, like wolves that can smell, see, hear everything top level, that it really comes down to whether or not you're accepted and whether or not they perceive you as non-danger. And we've experienced this several times, that really it is very much about your attitude, how you walk into the field, and also whether or not you're imposing or not imposing yourself. So I guess being kind of also humble towards nature and the wildlife species you'd like to portray is a crucial aspect, that you really consider this not like architecture photography, but as an interaction with nature, and really respect this nature and see it as a gift that eventually you're being granted options of photographing an animal species.
And well, for example, in the picture behind you, the tiger appears to be looking straight at you. Did he notice you, or like does that happen often, or is it just luck when it does?
Well, yeah. I mean, the tiger does, because we are in India. You're usually like in Africa in a jeep, and so the animal knows that you're around. But usually, or at least those images that are the most inspiring in my opinion, so for myself, are those where the animals know that you are there. So there's this, I don't know, this magical bond between you and your subject that's only there if the animal also sort of accepts you and knows that you are around, and then that's the most interesting photography in my opinion. So.
And but if it's ever like a big predator, like you said in Europe, like if it was a brown bear and it noticed you, would you ever get scared, or do you know that it's not going to do anything?
We are not
I guess the best story to kind of give it as an example would be the bear that was interested in us.
It was approaching us.
Yeah.
But not in a harmful way.
Absolutely not.
It was just curious, and the image out of all bear images from the project, and I think that are heaps, I don't know, hundreds or thousands. That's still my personal favorite, because you can see from the image that the animal was interested in us or just curious, and that's something really, I don't know, something really special. That's it's rare. It's not often that an animal approaches you and knows about you and it's not running away. And that's something really special that we appreciate, and we are, and we know that it's something, precious.
Yeah. But almost makes them cute. I mean, they're always cute, but I mean, it's like if you look at the picture above you, then it makes it a lot cuter, at least to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing that I was scared of. I took this image. And there's hardly, as you've mentioned before, we are not scared of wildlife. So if you're working on a species, no matter if it's brown bear or American alligators or sharks or whatever, we are not scared of, because then I think it would be the wrong choice of profession. Yeah. But we know how, or at least we think that we know how to behave. It's always a matter of respect and distance. If you feel that an animal's or that the animal is sort of stressed out, then we just step back and give the animal space. But usually it's like mentioned, it's the most precious thing if an animal accepts us or you. So that's something really cool.
But you got to be aware that such as or when looking at humans, there are different characters, and the same is true for wildlife species. Also, with them, you have different characters, no matter whether it's a reptile, a mammal, a bird. They are more adventurous or less adventurous, more curious or more cautious. And you gotta kind of understand, or at least have the understanding of whether or not this animal is up for kind of
a photo session.
A photo session. And it's not with all of them the idea. And it's kind of, especially if it's a poisonous or a potentially dangerous animal, because it can bite, this can be harmful for you, then it's simply, your responsibility to see whether or not you can interact. And most accidents actually that take place between humans and wildlife are or have been provoked by wrong human behavior. And so this is something we always got to watch out for, especially when there's alerts or articles on media in print, and where very quickly it is clear that the animal is the culprit and the animal is the bad guy.
Yeah, often just scared, really. What did I want to say? Yeah, could you maybe talk about an experience you had with an endangered species and like the ethical considerations that are involved with something like that?
What example do you have there?
Maybe the crowned eagles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we've worked on a story about crowned eagles in South Africa back in 2018, and they are endangered in South Africa because the tropical environments are declining, or the forests are declining. And so they are somehow invading the cities. So they're nesting on garden trees, and that brings up some tension between, pet owners and wildlife and the birds themselves. But with this project, we've learned a lot about, or from the scientists, how to get close to the birds, because Christine, especially, you were also doing all the tree climbing and setting up the nest camps. And nesting camps is always something, where we rather find out if it's really ethically to set up a camera on a nest or close to some really
how close is, whether or not it's
sensitive aspects of,
this is definitely something that only scientists who are really involved close up, because they are monitoring the birds and whether or not they can
also using drones with wildlife, because here in Europe, or in Austria especially, no one would use drones for birds of prey, which I fully understand. But in South Africa, they are conducting all aspects or all sorts of research with drones high up on the trees or in the trees, somehow getting close to the birds. And so we've also learned that we can use the drone for photography close to the nest sites of the birds. But that's something that we wouldn't do without, the feedback of the scientists, especially.
Because in that case in particular, leading scientist on crowned eagles has had 7 years of experience and has even published material on drone usage for monitoring. So if you have this feedback, then you can think of photo ideas that incorporate, for example, a drone. But the thing is, only because you have the idea and you think this could be a cool photo opportunity, but there's no sound information whether or not this is huge stress for the bird or for the species or not, then you should always refrain from doing so. So the idea also in our work is not to go beyond the limits, but to find out what is feasible, and then within the given options to best interpret these and to best document the birds. And with regard to the crowned eagles, it was really to show them in their urban context, how they would nest like more or less in the city. And that was really exciting, but also demanding, because like just the setup was really different than when you're out there somewhere where there are no people, and when you're surrounded always by people. This kind of brings up certain issues that wouldn't come up or are out of the question when you're out there somewhere alone.
Would you say it was in some ways easier or harder overall?
Working in the cities,
Yeah.
it's harder. Yeah. I don't like being, watched by people while working. So that's something that I've really, I didn't get really used to this aspect of working always
Yeah.
under neighbor watch conditions. But on the other hand, it was quite interesting and quite special because of this aspect of this close proximity of people and the African crowned eagle, which is the largest eagle in Africa. And it's an impressive bird of prey, nesting right in the city of Durban. In our case, we were working in Durban. So but I'd rather be somewhere out in the wild.
Would you say this would be maybe your most memorable moment in photography, or is there a more memorable one?
Well, I would say there were more memorable moments. This was definitely one because it was so special. It was so different to also other wildlife photography experiences we had. But there were also other moments. I mean, I personally can think of moments where there were close encounters that have happened by chance, more or less, because unless we use a photo trap, we ourselves would not intentionally approach like huge, large animals, like musk ox, for example, in Scandinavia, too close, because we're aware that these animals need to have any animal needs to have his or her safety distance. But
they are massive and we are not.
So that's the point, yeah. But in one occasion, I happened to be so involved and so focused on photographing that I didn't notice that a group of musk ox was actually just venturing towards me. When I realized so, it was too late to really step back, because it was also a bit hilly, and well, you would rather, or I would have just stumbled over probably and would have made things worse. So what I did in that moment is just simply, and this is the advice I would give anybody, is just simply do not move at all. Don't make any movement. Also don't photograph. So I stopped photographing, because back at that time, it was common still to have the cameras, which we still use there once in a while, that make clicking sounds, which is nowadays, and not always. So back in the old times. And but the experience itself, even though, I mean, I did take a photo and I took footage before they came too close, but then I just stopped and just, well, in a way, experienced this moment and felt really, well,
you just hope not to be run over.
I hope not to be run over. So it was shifting between, oh my God, why did I put myself into that situation? And on the other side, actually being quite excited about this super close encounter. And well, the muskox just kind of started chewing on vegetation next to me, like 2 meters next to me. And I felt like, so come on, move on. Just move on. But that was definitely one highlight, simply because it was such an intense moment. But yeah, there were many other moments as well.
Usually it's quite simple. If you really dream of a certain image or working close with a certain species, and everything turns out to be, successful and perfectly fine, then it's, I think, the most rewarding and most memorable aspect of our work.
Yeah.
When we had the bear photographs that put the bears in close proximity to settlements and to gardens when we had all these visions, and it took us like 1.5, 2 years until eventually the photos came to life. Then this really is a moment when you finally have everything come together, even though we were not behind the camera ourselves at that very moment because we had set up all the technical stuff before. But when you see it works out, then it's just something exciting.
I remember sometimes you see these pictures of like there's an animal behind the camera and there's another animal in front of the camera. Did that ever happen to you? Or I guess it's not common, but the picture.
No, it didn't happen with us. I'm not
We
sure.
just had
Yeah.
pictures in the Everglades.
Yeah.
Sort of.
They tried to feed on me.
You and also they tried to steal our equipment from the backpack, which was somewhere, you know, close to the car and just on the ground without us being close by. But usually I think animals, yeah, won't take a picture of you.
At least not in our case.
Yeah.
But the vultures were pretty close. Yeah, that's right.
How do you like stay current and continue to develop your skills as a photographer all the time?
Well, I guess the both of us, we never consider ourselves to be finished or to have reached like the final goal. So we always challenge ourselves to continue learning, and we do so basically a lot due to practicing, basically simply going out in the field and trying out things, but also by also letting ourselves, or at least in my case, and I guess in yours as well, letting ourselves be inspired by other people's work, and not because of trying to copy them. That's like the complete wrong, or would be the complete wrong direction in our idea, but to challenge ourselves to keep thinking in new directions. And that helps if you also check out other people's work, and it inspires you because you see how much is out there and how many good stories are out there. And so that, I believe, is like a driver that you come up with new ideas. Personally, I would say.
Yeah, but also each new subject brings up new aspects that need to be, you know, that
how can you technically also put an idea into action?
So even if you think you've already gained a lot of experience, there's always something new when it comes to another species or a new topic, or especially also with our approach of implementing underwater photography, underwater film, drone and land-based photography. So it's an endless story of learning new things, I think.
Yeah. But are there any like tips and advice you could share to aspiring wildlife photographers?
So many. I mean, the first one would be come up with your own ideas. So I think even if you get inspired, like Christine said, from or by the work of colleagues or more or less famous people around the globe, as soon as you see many images taken in the same environment, take the inspiration, but turn around 180 degrees and go your own, you know, find your own path. That's my very personal motor of motivation, and I think that's something crucial because it brings variety in the field of photography and also conservation and wildlife photography. So don't get stuck in a field that's really where a lot of other people already worked on.
And I guess another good advice would be not search for, I mean, do your research on the internet and stuff, but do not search for new ideas on the internet. Because if you see something on the internet already, then it's no longer a new idea. So the best advice would be to go outside, go into the field and engage with scientists, with local community, talk to the people in the field, to hunters, to whoever is associated with wildlife, because that is where you're going to unravel new stories. And not necessarily, a new story does not necessarily need to cover a new species, but just look at it from a different perspectives and put it into different associations with other wildlife, with ecosystems. I guess this is something that's still a lot underrepresented, that we're trying to combine stories, or to look at stories and all the interactions between wildlife species. And there's also, when you talk to scientists in the field, for example, there's still a lot that needs to be unraveled, that still scientists don't know, and which would be also crucial for our own survival, actually, to better understand how we're interacting, how symbiosis work, for example, or how mutual coexistence works in nature. And I think there's so much potential to tell stories on any level, on any scale of wildlife species, from the tiniest aspects and the tiniest creatures to the largest.
Yeah.
Really understand the power of composition and perspective, because even if you have the newest camera, the best images always, you know, they will come from your mind and your heart. And so it's you and your composition and your style of photography that really separates you from your colleagues. And yeah, has the most artistic power in photography is you, and not the camera.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for those tips. What do I want to say? Oh yeah, like, how do you manage the business side of your photography, like marketing, pricing, and managing your portfolio and all that?
Well, this is also a procedure, or a process that we have gone through in a way, because especially in our field, or here in Austria, I don't know, maybe what's the case in your place, but there's not so many people working in the field that we're working in. So it's very difficult to have comparisons, or to have like a standard from which you sort of can get started. So I guess it's important, especially when beginning, and I think we always did this, to set a certain level and to never kind of sell yourself out. So you got to set a certain price, and do not back away or be afraid of setting a price, and making clear that the work you're doing engulfs or incorporates a lot of effort, and this needs to be paid, of course, as well. Yeah. And so therefore it's a combination of interacting, especially in the beginning stages of interacting with many potential clients, and being yourself the person most active. We've always been actively engaging with potential clients, offering our options, but not selling yourself out in a way so that you're just going with budget prices, for example. But you got to be kind of in a, let's say, in a realistic range in a way. But you kind of sense that.
Yeah, but just simply ask, you know,
Yeah.
if you don't know what you can charge,
Yeah.
just ask someone, you know.
Usually
yeah.
NGOs have budgets and say, okay, this is our scope, and then,
So, yeah. I mean, we know from ourselves, and we understand that it's pretty tough task to get started, to understand what's the price that I can charge, and what's going on in the economical world. But yeah, my advice would be just ask someone, you know, ask a colleague or so, because
we did a lot do that. So just asking colleagues, so what would you charge? And that helps you to sort of, in the very beginning, have a price that is also good for the other people in the community. Because if there's too many people who have like really budget prices, and who are happy just to sell every single photo or every single story for maybe just a sandwich kind of worth, then this is going to have an effect on the whole kind of profession and all the people working in this field. So it's really important to make clear for yourself that this is a job that needs to be paid for in a way, but in a realistic range. And so asking and interacting with the colleagues in the field helps a lot, especially to get started. And then it really needs mostly effort from yourself in building a strong foundation of clients, building a strong network. And then I would say more or less after a couple of years or so, you will slowly realize or notice that there's kind of a feedback loop coming in, and that sooner or later, when you're establishing yourself in this field and people notice that the work you're doing is good, there will be demands coming in, and eventually you will be getting into the stage where you can choose also from either coming up with own ideas and suggesting to people, and it's going to be easier that this is going to be financed because you've established a certain base, or you can choose from options that being laid out in front of you. And yeah, but it always in the beginning necessitates a lot of effort. And
we have learned over the course of the last 10 or 12 years or 14 years that our job is not about counting hours. So it's about setting up a project and, fully understand what that means in terms of input and output, but we are not counting hours. So sometimes we are lucky in a way.
We would have never get started if we had started counting hours. We would have stopped right in the beginning.
Yeah. But sometimes you're lucky and get everything you need in a shorter amount of time that you thought that you need. And sometimes you're not lucky. And then it's,
or it takes longer hours, yeah. But in the end, it kind of should be balanced in a way. And yeah, but that's, I guess, what everybody needs to figure out for him or herself. What is the proper balance? But to us, this has never been something of a huge kind of task, but more or less we've always seen it, or I've always seen it as an option or an opportunity, being freelance and being able to choose with whom we can be working together. So we have come to appreciate this a lot.
Yeah. So like, how do you go about choosing like your locations and subjects? Is it more business orientated, or would you say it's more orientated around what you're really interested in?
Ideally, both.
Yeah, I mean, but it just took a while to find the answer because it's not business orientated. Although we are a company, we are now running a company for 10 years, so we need to be business orientated, but we are not looking for jobs to make some money. So in the end, there's always an aspect of a project that's business, but usually it's always. It took those 3 moments because I was just trying to find out. But in all aspects of our job, we are still, after 10 years, mostly or most of the times coming up with our own ideas. So it's passion and, the field. So we are not coming up with ideas that we don't want to work on.
But ideally, of course, these ideas need to fit somebody else's plans, for example. But so far, this has always kind of met each other in a way. And usually there are more ideas anyway that we can put into action at a given time. So that, sooner or later, or at least one is remaining where we feel happy with, and the clients as well. But I think it's crucial also, especially the longer a project lasts, that you really identify with that project, because otherwise you're neither going to produce good work and you're not going to be really happy with that topic. So it has to be something that is close to you, and or at least that appeals to you.
If you have like an idea that you really want to get into to happen, is there a specific way you'd go about asking someone if they want it to happen too? Or is it more about just waiting to see if someone does?
Well, we do ask other people also if would be interested in that topic in a way. Like when talking about our film projects, for example, when we have ideas, then we go to our clients or to the TV stations and the film producers that we collaborate with, and we ask them what they think about it. And usually we also do thorough research before to see if there has been something done on this topic just recently, because then there would be less interest, of course, to have something done on it at all. But we've also, of course, especially when talking about the large predators, that was a topic that we simply got started with. I mean, at the same time, there was nothing major happening in the field of conservation photography in Central Europe with large predators when we got started. But still, this wasn't really the trigger. The trigger itself was that we felt prone to that topic. And so it's both. It's that we interact with people and then we come up with ideas and we feel like, yep, that's a really interesting story and we'd like to tell it. So it's both.
Definitely. That's balance, I suppose.
It always comes down to balance.
How do you approach like capturing wildlife behavior and emotions in your images? Because they are just images most of the time rather than videos. How would you manage to do that?
That comes from really learning and understanding about your subject. You know, there's always, I think the first step is coming up with the main idea, and then you dive into a certain subject or you learn about a certain species, and then you have those keystone events popping up, you know, like, I don't know, where do they forage, where do they hang out during the day, and so on and so on. And then you learn about a subject, and then there are those are the photo ideas coming up and emerging, and then you really focus on a certain behavior and just work on it. So it's usually our images are not taken or captured by chance. So we always have an idea of where we want to go to and where we need to look for a certain behavior to happen. So,
and in the event itself, it also has a lot to do with anticipation. So when we're there, then and you've studied the behavior of an animal and you dive in, then you know that certain behavior will trigger follow-up behavior. And when you're aware of that, you can already get ready for the moment to happen, more or less. And so this helps a lot to know a little bit in advance what is going to happen, or what is your subject going to do next.
Yeah, that's also a crucial tip. One more tip for the emerging photographers, that you really understand that the best images are not taken when you are sort of just how to explain, you know what I want to say,
when
that
you're just walking around.
Yeah, that you're always one step ahead, you know, that you're just sort of following your subject and following wildlife behavior. So you need to be one step ahead. So rather miss a chance on purpose and be prepared for the next chance, and this will be the perfect image.
Yeah. A bit more going back to the technical side of things. How do you approach like post-processing of your images and videos, of course?
Well, with a good cup of tea. Probably the first thing, because or we try to get started with it bit by bit, because usually or it depends, as Marc has mentioned, after a 2-week session then you've got a lot of material, and this is like quite a pile to work through, but we try at certain stages at least to sort through the material before we go into the actual post-processing. And we also work with well, not necessarily with presets, but when we have a certain light situation and a specific session where there is particular lighting, then we develop one photo and then use this basic development for the other photos as well, more or less from that session. Yeah, so that helps also to
save time,
reduce the amount of time.
But it all starts with selecting and deleting, and selecting and deleting, and third run through deleting. Just dig out the really good stuff, and then we go into that process of post, like Christine said, where we try to save time. The both of us, we are not the biggest computer fans. So we like to really reduce the time of working on the computer. And we have basically we just save the raw images, and we don't really process each image. So we just process it if we really need it for publication or for an exhibition or so. And the rest would just be to properly save them in our raw archive.
Yeah.
The amount of processing is more or less really reduced to the basic necessities that come along with when you take a raw photograph. But we are not the kind of photographers, because it's not appealing to us, who would stick in front of a computer for 3 hours processing just a single photograph. So also our approach is more or less to be more realistic in our photography. So,
and being quite precise in the field.
Yeah.
So we believe that a proper exposure and composition can save you time, you know, when working or being busy with the post-production. So we'd rather work in the field and reduce the time of computer work.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, like, how do you balance like the ethical concerns around like photographing wildlife and the desire to capture amazing images, like you say, in the field?
Well, we have a major rule. The golden rule is not to push on wildlife, and the image can't be as important or too important to harm wildlife. That's a major rule. So we are photographers and professionals, but we've never ever wanted an image, you know, any price.
So always you have to have your own boundaries, and the idea is, what would be the sense of kind of promoting conservation issues if you try to get an image by harming a wildlife species? Of course, it's always hard to tell what does harm a species. Is it already too much to simply be present in an area? This can, of course, cause extra stress simply because one is there. But we've learned that a lot of wildlife is very pragmatic, or we're very kind of, not actually caring too much about simply the presence of humans, but only caring about once we're kind of pushing forward. So once you're actually like interfering with the activity range of an animal, then they're going to be more alert and wondering what's happening. For example, we did a story on wild mountain reindeer, like the ancestors of those domesticated mountain reindeer in Scandinavia. And they do run for many miles, more or less, a day. But of course, when you cause, for example, a whole herd to get started and to move, then this is, of course, extra effort that they need to do when they kind of try to go or get away from you. So we're taking caution that we're not kind of causing animals to flee unnecessarily or to take refuge somewhere unnecessarily. So these are all, there's of course many examples, but it's always important to constantly question yourself. Is this step kind of still necessary, or can we just do the same thing when we're staying put, more or less? So this is, I guess there's not one kind of exact rule, because all animals and all characters are also different, also depending on, just as Marc mentioned before, if the animal is up for a photo shoot or not. So it's always reassessing in every situation if the situation is still okay, or if you realize, okay, now it's time to just really back up and leave the animals to themselves.
Relating back to your question, you see from the length of this answer already that it's a crucial aspect of our work, that we always discuss each step that we take on approaching wildlife. So that's something that we really have to stress, that it's not the image, the well-being of wildlife.
Yeah, definitely. One of the last questions, promise. Can you maybe discuss any of your future projects and plans you have for wildlife photography?
They are always a secret.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we will definitely keep on track with the big predators as well. So there's still topics that have emerged from our focus on Central Europe that we'd like to dive into deeper. It's also that the smaller predators are very interesting to us, such as the European wildcat. So we're still having plans to evolve on this further and to dive deeper into this topic. And what else is up? New film project, which is still a bit slightly undercover, but it will be in Europe. So on wildlife in Europe, or on nature in
marine topics in the Mediterranean. So quite range of different stories coming up.
Yeah, sounds really interesting. You both seem to be partners in life as well as in your mission to protect wildlife and nature. Like, does that make things easier in some ways?
It depends. No.
Yeah, usually we always believe it does, because we still can't imagine a situation like someone coming back from an inspiring project somewhere, I don't know, in South Africa or the Arctic or somewhere, and the other one being stuck to a computer somewhere in an office in Vienna, and then, I don't know, exchanging we are sharing a mindset, let's put it that way. So we are not sharing each project, but we are sharing a mindset, and that, I think, really helps and supports our ideas of the understanding of life. Let's put it that way.
And we also complement each other in a way. So I do believe in a way that we found each other to kind of work together on these stories, because it just feels so right and it just feels so natural. And it was basically in the end of our biology studies that we came across each other and figured we've got same or similar visions and ideas. And I think there's nothing more rewarding actually than having the chance to find a partner in life and work. And of course it comes along also with challenges when you're kind of working on a topic and it's 24/7 that you're together, and especially when it's all about differentiating work and holidays. So we have different opinions about this at certain stages, but we're working on this. But you need to have spare time as well. I guess that's like really crucial when you work together and live together. You need to sometimes really stop talking about work. You just also have really something else on your mind, to be fresh and newly inspired to do what you're doing.
But on the other hand, it's pretty cool to know that you're working with someone you can really relate on, you know. So even if I have a bad day, I know that Christine might not, and we are working with the same focus. So it's cool to be a team.
Yeah. Sounds nice. I guess that's all we have time for today then. But I'm sure you all enjoyed listening to our amazing guest tonight, and I want to extend a huge thank you to christinesonvilla and marcgraf for joining us and sharing their insights and experiences in the world of nature and wildlife conservation. Their passion for promoting environmental awareness through their photography and multimedia is truly inspiring. And I hope this interview has given you a better understanding of the important role that photography and visual media play in driving change and protecting our natural heritage. And thank you for tuning in. And be sure to follow Marc and Christine's work, and you can find a link to their website below. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning. Good night, everyone, and don't forget, guys, to stay responsible. Bye.